In the headlines tonight, U.S. President Barack Obama gives the go-ahead for targeted airstrikes in Iraq. He says they are needed to protect Americans and Iraqi civilians. The World Health Organization declares the Ebola outbreak in West Africa an international public health emergency. The agency's chief urges the global community to provide support. And Korea is gearing up to welcome Pope Francis, who will be in town next week. A journalist who covers the Vatican joins us for a look at what to expect. These and more coming right up at Early Edition at 6.
I see trees of green, red roses.
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다.
한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It's August 8th at 6 in the evening on a Friday here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Cho. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. We begin with a rather surprising announcement from U.S. President Barack Obama.
He has authorized the Pentagon to launch targeted airstrikes in Iraq where civilians are under siege on a mountain. Connie Lee has our top story.
It's a green light to help those being persecuted in Iraq. In a televised address on Thursday, U.S. President Barack Obama ordered 2 separate operations in Iraq. In his own words, targeted airstrikes to protect U.S. personnel in Iraq and humanitarian efforts consisting of airdrops to help save thousands of Iraqi civilians who are trapped in the mountains and facing almost certain death. The Islamic militant group ISIS is gaining ground in northern Iraq, most recently seizing the largest Christian town of Karkush and forcing tens and thousands of Christians and ethnic minorities to flee. The United Nations says about 40,000 of them are trapped in northern mountains. They've been ordered by militants to convert to Islam or face execution.
Women and children are being killed. We cannot get help. I have 4 children and I don't know where they are. 2 have disappeared and I don't know what happened to the other 2.
Mass killings of religious and ethnic minorities are reportedly taking place, with militants even beheading children. This, according to one Christian leader in Iraq speaking to CNN. The United Nations Security Council, after an emergency meeting on the situation on Thursday, condemned the attacks and called on the international community to support Iraq. Just in the past 2 days alone, ISIS militants, with their black flags, have taken over 6 towns in the north of the country. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now, over in the border between Israel and Palestine, a 3-day truce expired as of 8 a.m. local time in Gaza. The Gaza militants reportedly resumed rocket fire at Israel shortly after the ceasefire came to an end.
But even before that, the Israel Defense Forces claims Hamas fired 2 rockets that landed in southern Israel. Negotiations to extend the truce ran into late Thursday in Cairo, Egypt. Israel had offered to extend it, but Palestinian factions reportedly rejected the proposal. 66 Israelis and nearly 1,900 Palestinians have been killed in the 1-month conflict. Shifting gears now, the nation is getting ready to welcome Pope Francis, who will be in town next week.
Very exciting, and he will be greeted by President Park Geun-hye at the airport and is expected to deliver a message for inter-Korean reconciliation.
Our Ji Myung-gil reports on the Pope's itinerary released by the Vatican on Thursday.
Pope Francis will be the first pontiff in nearly 2 decades to visit the Far East when he visits South Korea next week. The Vatican said Thursday that during his 5-day visit, Pope Francis will attend the closing Mass at the Youth Day gathering and the Reconciliation Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in Seoul.
going to Korea and praying for reconciliation and peace for the Korean people has a great significant meaning.
He will also celebrate the Asian World Youth Day with young people across the continent and beatify the large group of martyrs who first brought the Catholic faith to Korea. He will find in Korea a Catholic church that exemplifies much of what he hopes for the church around the world to be, including a highly active laity. The Vatican also confirmed that North Korea has declined to send Catholic believers to a papal mass in Seoul, but said the invitation from the South Korean church was still open. Pope Francis will meet relatives of the victims of April's Seoul ferry sinking, as well as surviving Korean comfort women who were forced into sex slavery for Japanese troops during World War II. For the first time on a foreign trip, Pope Francis will speak in public on 4 occasions in English among his 11 speeches. The pontiff's plane is due to fly over Chinese airspace, and Vatican protocol calls for the Pope to send greetings to the leaders of all the countries he flies over. Kim Young-gyun, Arirang News.
It's fair to say that Catholics and even non-Catholics here in Korea are very much excited about the Pope's visit next week.
And for more, we are joined live by Kristen Martini Grimaldi, journalist covering the Vatican City.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you must have had many chances to meet Pope Francis in person, so do tell us about something that we don't know.
Well, actually, I only met him once in person, but I can say that he has a great smile, he has a fantastic sense of humor, he's a very humble person, and most of all, the impressions that people who met him, they all relate to each other some way or another. I'll give you an example. I interviewed a few months ago the head of the Kotone congregation in Korea, and he visited the Pope last year, actually, in August. And the Pope just came to the door, opened the door for him. He was introduced, there were other people from the same congregation. They all sat at the table, round table, and the Pope just wanted to hear from them, like stories about abandoned people, homeless, and sick people. And all of a sudden he realized that there were 40 minutes on this conversation they had. And he told me, well, that's exactly twice the time that he spent in the previous appointment that was with the President of Israel. So that tells you what kind of priorities this Pope has.
Well, certainly he is extremely down to earth and is very approachable, and he has a very interesting background. He was a bouncer at a bar. He's also a man of science, and also he is an extreme romantic. Almost gave up his religious pursuit because he was extremely in love with this particular lady. That's what I heard. And he, of course, is planning to visit Korea. That's why we're all excited to have him. Why do you think, what's the rationale behind the Pope's choice Korea as the first Asian country to visit?
Well, this is an acknowledgement to the courage, fortitude, and of the Christians in Korea throughout their whole history. If you look at the history of Korean church, it's a unique example, not only in Asia, in the whole world. It was a church started by not by missionaries, as a tradition is, but by lay people, by ordinary people. This was literary people that were men of culture who went to China and studied books written by Jesuits. These were, one of them was Matteo Ricci. Matteo Ricci wrote these books, scientific books, but also books on the doctrine of the Catholic Church. And he tried to couch this Christianity in a Confucian style, so that the message, the revolutionary message of Christianity, meaning we're all equal, that wouldn't be too shocking to the then very conservative Chinese and Korean class system society.
And perhaps history, the unique history of Korean Catholic community also played a role in choosing Korea as the first nation to visit. But what message do you think he will deliver during his 5-day visit?
I can tell you one message I hope he will deliver. I met one of the Italian missionaries, been working here in Korea for over 20 years. And I introduced one of my questions saying, no, so this Pope speaks of a poor church for the poor. And he said, I stop you right there. The Korean church is a rich church for the rich. I said, how is that? So, well, for example, if you have a believer who's he cannot pay his tithe every month because he has some financial trouble because he lost his jobs, then what he usually does, he leaves the church. He doesn't go to church anymore, rather to go on and living and bearing the shame of being non-compliant. So, the social environment inside the church, you just go inside the church today in Korea, it's an upper middle class society where people feel uncomfortable if they don't have the right dress. The same way we'd feel uneasy if you walk into a very poshy Gangnam bar, wearing sneakers. So what I would say is that church is not a club, meaning this is in practice that has to change. We're talking about it reaching 20 million more Catholics by the next 5 years. And that's a very good goal. That's a very ambitious goal, and I hope they will reach that. It's signs of a very positive attitude, but in order to do that, they have to reach down to the lower class of people, which are the ones being left out right now.
Right, one thing we love about the new Pope is that he is very open. He has been known for active involvement in interfaith dialogue. Yes. And of course, to learn a little bit more about him, it won't hurt to read the book that you wrote. Unfortunately, we could not have it in the studio right now. We'll have it in our later newscast. Right. It's not even published in Korea yet. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what motivated you to write that book?
Well, this book starts with a phone call. Phone call was just saying, are you going? And I said, yeah, sure, I'm going. And that was my director from Osservatore Romano was asking me if I was ready to fly half a world away to South America in order to follow this new pope. Because back then, 5 minutes earlier from that phone call, we didn't know where the new pope would come from. So I just hopped on the first plane to Buenos Aires. There I found a very troubled social environment. Where you got this drug called Paco, which is destroying entire districts, young people especially, is getting addicted. And you got priests. I went to interview these priests who work to recover, to help the recovery of these young people. And this has been done also through the help of the Jorge Mario Bergoglio, which is the new pope, when he was a bishop and cardinal back in Buenos Aires. He helped financially and morally, and also through his personal persona. He went there, by himself, trying to give a hand to these people. So the image that we have this Pope through the books, through the stories that emerges on this book, is that he's a very humble man. He's a very simple man, and he's a man who put the preaching of the gospel at the core of his lifestyle.
Is the book going to be published in Korean?
It's going to be published in Korean. Yes, unfortunately, we can't have it here, but that's the idea. Yes, I mean it's already published. It's not in the bookshop yet.
Right,
but will be in a few days, I guess.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Kristen, so much for your time, and I'm sure you will enjoy the rest of next week. It will be a very busy week for you, as it will be for us, and a very enjoyable one as well. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Now, Korea's finance minister has called on the parliament to quickly pass a stack of bills that are needed to help boost the economy. He says it needs to be done as soon as possible, as the structural problems plaguing Korea's economy are deeply, deeply rooted. Kwon So-ah has this report.
At least 30 economic bills need to be passed as soon as possible to ensure they don't miss the golden time of a chance to revitalize the nation's economy. This is what Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said at an emergency meeting with economy-related ministers on Friday, once again putting pressure on lawmakers who have more than 7,000 bills awaiting parliamentary approval. Choi asked for the National Assembly's cooperation, stressing that this is the last chance to put the focus on raising household income, which should in turn boost domestic demand and the overall economy. He warned there wasn't much time, emphasizing the country's GDP increased a mere 0.6% in the second quarter of the year from the previous quarter. The minister said out of the 30 most urgent bills, 18 concern the investment sector, 6 the normalization of the housing market, 3 are related to the public welfare, and another 3 on the protection of financial and private data. To fulfill that goal, Choi asked that all ministers take the issue directly into their own hands to gain the understanding and cooperation of the people and the assembly, and told them he will be closely monitoring their progress. The government's new tax revision on conglomerates and others will be subject to parliamentary revision at a plenary session next week. Since before his inauguration as finance minister in July, Choi's priority has been on revitalizing the economy by easing financial regulations, which runs in line with President Park's deregulation drive. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The former chairman of the ruling Itinerary Party is now the nation's new education minister. The National Assembly's Education Committee signed off on Wang Yi on Friday following his confirmation hearing the day before. The 5-term lawmaker was tapped for the post after President Park Geun-hye's first choice, Kim Myung-soo, withdrew about a month ago over allegations of plagiarism. The Assembly has one more confirmation hearing to get to now, that being for Culture Minister nominee Kim Jong-deok. Now, in the wake of April's ferry disaster, President Park vowed to root out corruption, starting with collusive ties between the public and private sectors. And for the first time since, an arrest warrant has been sought against a member of the National Assembly over suspicions that he took tens of thousands of dollars from a company in exchange for benefits. Connie Kim reports.
State prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for a National Assembly member over bribery charges. Ruling Itinerary Party representative Cho Hyun-yong is suspected of taking more than $150,000 from local train part supplier Sampyo E&C in return for awarding the company lucrative contracts. The prosecution accuses Cho of taking money from the Korea Rail Network before and after he was elected as a lawmaker in 2012. It represents the first such case since President Park pledged to root out corruption among public and elected officials in wake of April's Haeodo ferry disaster. Collusive ties between regulators and the operator of the ferry have been blamed for its sinking. It's common in Korea for retired bureaucrats to be hired by companies and public institutions that expect them to pressure their former colleagues or subordinates to ignore corrupt or irregular practices at the organizations. As of now, 1 sitting representative from the ruling party and 3 from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy are under suspicion of receiving bribes. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
This weekend's ASEAN Forum in Myanmar will host the region's top diplomats for talks on matters of mutual concern. But the sidelines will see the most action. Korea's foreign minister is scheduled to hold a series of talks with his counterparts over the coming days. He started off Friday by meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The top diplomats of Korea and China met this afternoon on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue. Although details of their meeting have yet to come out, Foreign Minister Yun Byungse was widely expected to call on his counterpart Wang Yi to continue trying to persuade North Korea to soften its stance on the nuclear issue. The possibility of resuming six-party talks was also expected to come up. Yoon has joined other diplomats from ASEAN members as well as major nations in Naypyidaw for a series of meetings that will culminate in the ASEAN Regional Forum on Sunday. Korea's foreign minister is expected to use the arena to hold meetings with India and Canada, as well as trilateral talks with Japan and the U.S. Particular attention is being paid to whether Yoon will meet with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida for bilateral talks. Ties between the two neighboring countries have hit a low point in recent months over historical and territorial differences. Could a South-North meeting also be in the works? North Korea's new foreign minister Lee Soo-yong, who took his post in April, will be in attendance this weekend after a series of visits to other nations in the region, such as Vietnam and Singapore. During the ASEAN Forum, Ri is expected to hold talks with China, Mongolia, and Myanmar. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Japan's wartime sexual slavery and its ongoing lack of repentance on the issue could stand in the way of the country's attempt to gain a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. And this, according to diplomatic sources at the UN, as international calls grow for Japan to atone for forcing tens of thousands of women into sexual slavery before and during World War II. The sources said the unresolved issue, which came back under the spotlight following a recent landmark visit of 2 Korean victims to the White House, will likely work against Tokyo ahead of the UN General Assembly in September. Japan is pushing for a UN Security Council reform while seeking to obtain a permanent membership along with Germany, India, and Brazil. With the death toll topping 900 for the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, the World Health Organization has officially declared the situation a public health emergency and called on the world to help contain the spread. Shin Se-min has the latest.
I am declaring the current outbreak of Ebola virus disease a public health emergency of international concern.
It's official. In calling the deadly Ebola outbreak an extraordinary event and an emergency, the World Health Organization is saying it's a public health risk to other countries. In a statement released after a 2-day meeting of its emergency committee, the WHO said a coordinated worldwide response is needed to stop and reverse the worldwide spread of the disease. The UN Health Agency also said that although concerns are growing, there should be no general bans placed on international travel. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention already elevated their response on the spread of Ebola to its highest level this week and has recommended against traveling to West Africa. Amid growing international pressure to consider the use of experimental drugs in combating the virus, the U.S. government is forming a special Ebola working body that will explore its options. The WHO says more than 1,700 people have been infected in the current Ebola outbreak that has killed at least 932 people. The UN organization declared similar emergencies for the swine flu pandemic in 2009 and for polio earlier this year. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Chinese yuan-dominated deposits at local banks held by Korean residents jumped to a record high last month. Deposits reached $16.2 billion in July. That's up $4.2 billion from the previous month. The Bank of Korea attributed the growth to more local institutions putting their money in the hands of Chinese lenders who offered higher interest rate products than in the month before. Overall, foreign currency deposits amounted to $62.5 billion in July. That's the first time the total has topped $60 billion. Deposits in the U.S. dollar, the euro, and Japanese yen all dropped from the month before.
Korea, Japan, and China, the 3 neighbors in the Northeast Asia, have rather complicated relationships with one another, affected by centuries of historical and conflicts and disputes.
That's right. But student representatives from the 3 countries are trying to look beyond the differences. Our Park Ji-won has this story.
These teenagers from 3 different countries, Korea, China, and Japan, are laughing as they play games together. They may not understand one another because of the language barrier, but that isn't stopping them from enjoying themselves.
History shows us numerous conflicts between our countries, but actually meeting these people gave me fresh ideas about friendship.
Neither English nor Japanese work here, but it's great that we have so much fun beyond the language barrier.
The events are fun and the people here are very kind. I hope this can be an opportunity to promote mutual friendship and erase prejudice we might have against one another.
This program is part of an annual education tourism forum organized by the governments of the 3 countries. It was launched in 2006 to nurture a global mindset in the hearts of the young.
Over the past few decades, Germany and France have organized exchanges of about 7 million students. They've turned once hostile memories of war into a new cooperative relationship. I believe Korea, Japan, and China can make a new road into the peaceful future through the active engagement of student exchanges.
Organizers hope the opportunity provides participating students a chance to develop a global perspective and builds mutual understanding. 박지원, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Good evening. The eastern coastal regions are slowly being influenced by the typhoon, and people there and in the southern parts of the country will feel the brunt of the storm tomorrow, when up to 200 millimeters of rain will fall along with some strong winds. Now, up to 20 millimeters of rain are also forecast tomorrow in Gangwon-do province, while up to 80 are expected in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Now, as for the weather conditions where it's dry, which includes Seoul, and they can expect a scorching hot weekend with temperatures back into the 30s with partially cloudy skies. Now, going over to our temperature readings. Seoul will top out the Saturday morning at 23 before reaching up to 31 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will both top to 27 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops to 27, while Dokdo hits 22, while Mount Kumgang tops to 26. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Parkan. Back to you guys.
Well, that's all from us for this week. Thank you for staying with us. This has been Daniel Chan.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening and join us again same time on Monday.